Live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Shanali Basak.
And I'm Tim Stanovic. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto. We'll look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
And Bitcoin caught up in the market volatility this week, tariff fears and crypto sentiment swinging the price.
These moves come ahead of a potential strategic crypto reserve and the first ever White House Digital Asset Summit.
And in just a moment, we're going to chat with Chainlink's Sergey Nazarov, who will attend tomorrow's summit at the White House.
That's all ahead right here on Bloomberg Crypto. First, though, check on what's been happening with that wild ride of Bitcoin over the last 5 days. Look at over there on the left side of your screen. That's Sunday. You see it surge on Sunday. That's the day that Trump talked up the idea of a strategic reserve that he clarified would include Bitcoin and Ether, as well as what he referred to as, quote, other valuable cryptocurrencies. Shanali's going to talk about that in just a second. But look what happened on Monday. The rally fizzling after the excitement turned to skepticism. That back and forth about tariffs this week, it's hit risk assets. Look what's happened to the equity market, crypto included. Bitcoin did fall as low as $81,400. That was on Wednesday, but over the last 5 days, it is actually up by about 3.8%, Shanali.
Right, that 5-day chart, the 7-day chart, these are things that are important to look at, and the price levels as well. Also important to look at the tokens that Trump suggested as additions to that strategic crypto reserve of the inclusion of lesser known tokens, at least to the broader public, such as XRP, Solana, and Cardano. This was met with questions about the project's merits. It was also controversial in the crypto community as well, because many believe that Bitcoin should be the main asset to look at. Yet the others are being suggested. At the same time, investors try to figure out what these assets are going to mean for the future of cryptocurrencies. Cardano, Tim, is up 38% nonetheless in the past 7 days, even with an 8.5% decline today.
Yeah, certainly a big theme on our program today is going to be why these things were included in President Trump's comments over the weekend. A lot of people asking questions. But before that, tomorrow, the White House will host a number of crypto executives for the first ever summit, coordinated by AI and crypto czar David Sachs. Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev will be there, and here's what he told us last week about Sachs's role in the White House.
I'm excited about David Sachs coming in, and actually, if you saw our investor day, crypto and AI are the two technology trends that we believe will shape Robinhood's future and the future of the financial industry. So actually seeing that the government is aligning itself with these trends and making sure that the U.S. is number one, I think it'll help us.
Now, here for some context of the summit and the reserve, Bloomberg's Zeke Fox. And my big question here is you did have a lot of crypto executives going down to the White House, including at that big gala around the inauguration. Is this just a hype session, or are there actionable things to come out of this, particularly when most of the action's frankly happening in Congress when it comes to the biggest moves for crypto ahead?
No, I think this meeting will be big. I mean, just a couple of years ago, under the Biden administration, the U.S. government was trying to put a lot of these companies out of business. The SEC was suing them. Now, Trump has tossed those lawsuits, but we have to see what new rules will be created for crypto. So these guys all have a chance to press their case, also to try to get their coins in this strategic reserve.
All right, Bloomberg's Zeke Fox. Check out Zeke's book, Number Go Up, wherever you can buy books these days. And it's a lot of places, so just buy the book. Well, Chainlink founder Sergey Nazarov will be one of those folks at the summit, and he joins us now. Sergey, good to have you with us. Give us everything you know at this point about tomorrow's summit. What information do you have?
Yeah, so I know the folks attending. I know the time, which will be in the afternoon. I know that I think the leadership of the U.S. In the global financial system as it transitions into the Web3 format will probably be an interesting topic to discuss. I also know there's two key pieces of legislation in D.C. right now around the stablecoin bill and market structure. Those are likely topics to be discussed. But from what I can tell about the administration's goals and David Sachs' statements and kind of the direction there, I think the general direction is how do you create a level of leadership from the United States in the Web3 economy? And how does the U.S. financial system, as it transitions into a Web3 blockchain-powered format, how does it remain the dominant leading financial system in the global system?
Speaking of the global system here, what would really move the needle, because there's so many things being discussed that you have to wonder what should take priority. You have the lawsuits being dropped, and on one hand, that would certainly increase activity, but a strategic Bitcoin reserve, should that come before other things, such as stablecoin legislation? Arguably, a lot of the industry would have wanted to have that conversation come up first.
Yeah, I think that the need for clear regulation from the market structure bill and the stablecoin bill are topics that allow the U.S. financial system to clarify and adopt blockchain technology beyond whatever's in the reserve, right? So the reserve, I think, can serve as a backstop for an asset-backed kind of view of the U.S. economy or the U.S. dollar. And so the reserve has its own role to play, just like a gold reserve has its own role to play. Then there's a number of mechanisms and questions around how do you create the proper regulation so that the U.S. is the financial system where critical base assets are generated and then repackaged across into other financial systems. And then you have various questions around compliance and stable coins and these things. So I think there's almost two categories of questions. One question is, how does a reserve work? And another question is, how does the US financial system become the dominant force in the new version of the global financial system, which is powered by blockchains and smart contracts and Oracle networks?
You know, I want to bring back in our own Zeke Fox here for part of this conversation, because we're talking so much here about what the outcomes are for this meeting. Zeke, what do you think is going to be the most tangible thing? We already, to your point, saw some of these lawsuits from the SEC really start to be rolled back. But what else?
Yeah, I mean, we know that the SEC has said most of these cryptocurrencies are not securities, therefore they don't fall into our jurisdiction. But who is going to regulate them? Does that mean that they are the CFTC's business now? I think people at this meeting are going to have a lot of opinions about what should happen.
Sergey, I want to talk a little bit to you about this strategic reserve, this idea that, you know, there are a lot of folks in the crypto industry who say, yeah, we should have a reserve, but then you have the Bitcoin maxis who over the weekend and in the early part of the week spent a lot of time saying, wait a second, why are we seeing some of these lesser known digital tokens be included in President Trump's comments around this? What say you?
I think it's important to keep in mind what the role of a reserve is. So a reserve is almost like a backstop, and in the asset-backed view, kind of a way to justify the underlying security of an asset, like in this case, the U.S. financial system, the U.S. economy, the dollar, right? So what you would want from a reserve, in my opinion, and what you want from like a gold reserve, is that asset-backed view, that asset is inversely correlated with some other set of events, right? So if there's some set of extreme events, gold becomes more valuable. And so this is why the central banks have all been buying gold in record numbers. And so the crypto reserve, or any reserve, really has to create this inversely correlated relationship, right? You're basically practicing diversification. And so then the question becomes, once you define what the role of a reserve is, what is the benefit of including one coin or another coin in that reserve? And the fundamental answer to that is that it creates this inversely correlated relationship with something else happening that you're not currently protected against. And so the question there is, how does a reserve composed of these various tokens give you that greater assurance of being protected and inversely correlated and diversified against these other events? And it seems like the general idea right now is to have an index, right? So you have an index of tokens that basically create an inverse correlation on a holistic industry basis rather than just through Bitcoin. But Bitcoin does have a very clear thesis that it is inversely correlated with certain events in the state actor world, how the traditional financial system is developing. So I would view a crypto reserve as a mechanism for diversification and a way to create an asset backstop for the U.S. economy, U.S. financial system, U.S. dollar, and so on.
Sergey, there are quite a lot of U.S. dollars out there. Even in the kind of most extreme versions of the reserve that have been proposed, like Cynthia Lummis's plan to have the U.S. spend $100 billion of taxpayer money on buying Bitcoins, that wouldn't really be very big compared to the amount of dollars out there. How is this reserve actually going to help support anything? Or do you think it'll be much, much bigger?
I mean, you could say the same about the gold reserve, right? The gold reserve doesn't support anywhere near the amount of dollars in existence. This happened, when we went off the gold standard. And so I don't think reserves fundamentally function the way that reserves used to function. But I do think that at the same time, the thesis of diversification does make sense. It's one of the most basic kind of theses of the financial system and markets. And so if you're creating reserves or you're going back towards the pattern of having reserves, and the sovereign wealth fund might be another one of these things where it's a pattern of some kind of reserves of some other assets, you would ideally, if you were making reserves for yourself or for your company, you would practice diversification. So the way that I view it is not that it has to one-to-one match with everything. That possibility is lost to us when we went off the gold standard. It's really, I think, a matter of what is the composition of a reserve. Right now, the composition is gold, which is definitely inversely correlated with various negative global events. Now there's another category of reserve, such as Bitcoin and whatever other assets that fall into the category of a crypto reserve. And then maybe there's another category of the reserve, which is the assets in the sovereign wealth fund. But I think if you add all of those up together with gold, you still won't meet the standard of one-to-one backing of every US dollar. That's just not how fractional reserve banking works. That's not how fiat works, right? Fiat is let there be. We went off the gold standard and that's it. That was the choice.
Sergey, we got to leave it there. Looking forward to seeing what you find out tomorrow. That is Chainlink Co-Founder Sergey Nazarov and our own Bloomberg Zeke Fox. Now, I want to point out also that we do have Bitcoin that are near session lows, as you pointed out to me a little earlier, Tim. We have risk appetite across the board in markets, pretty significant because all the major indices are really near session lows, S&P 500, NASDAQ 100. But Bitcoin has now dropped back below that 89,000 level. And that, of course, shows you how much volatility you've seen. Even with that exuberance in the industry, risk can catch up with you.
Yeah, Bitcoin down 1.5% right now. Ether down 0.9%. XRP down higher by about 3.1%.
And coming up, what does the summit in the White House mean for digital asset regulation? We're going to ask the Deputy General Counsel of Kraken. And to access all the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the terminal. This is Bloomberg. The crypto industry awaiting that big White House digital asset summit tomorrow and what it might mean for blockchain policy under the Trump administration. Kraken Deputy General Counsel Jachym joins us now. One thing that we've been talking a lot about is when they announced the strategic Bitcoin reserve that there were a number of assets named. And then on the other hand, after you saw the SEC really roll back a lot of those lawsuits that they really put towards the industry, this idea that a token listing boom could ensue really started to hit the mind of investors. What does it mean for the types of assets that might proliferate in the crypto industry, good, bad, or ugly?
Thanks for having me on today. It's great to be here. Kraken's been actively engaged in policymaking here in Washington and other core markets. So we're really excited to see the crypto summit coming up. We're excited to see the pivot away from regulation by enforcement. We're excited to see Congress moving forward, the SEC crypto task force. These are all very positive developments, especially after the environment we've seen here in the United States after the last 3 years.
So what exactly do you want to see from this administration when it comes to policy? If you could sit down and write policy, what do you want to see?
Well, a lot of us have been working on it for a number of years here in the United States and abroad. Our primary focus has been on getting market structure legislation done. We've seen incredible bipartisan momentum, both in the House and Senate towards that goal. And we believe Congress has the opportunity to act decisively here this year to get a bill signed and put into law.
When you think about the future of where exchanges like yours are going, what do you think that the realm of possibility is in terms of expansion into more digital assets, given the changes that you're seeing? What's the direct impact, in other words?
Regulatory clarity, whether it's here in the United States or abroad, and I'll mention we operate a global business. We've already seen major markets take this foundational first step to bring centralized exchanges and businesses like Kraken into the regulatory perimeter. That clarity allows for investment and growth in a way that we haven't seen here in the United States. So I think as we pivot towards regulatory clarity here in the United States, it's going to be exciting opportunities for core centralized crypto markets. I think it's going to continue to power traditional market investment allocation into crypto markets. And look, we're also moving forward, as many others are, with on-chain markets and decentralized finance. So a lot of exciting things to come here. But that regulatory clarity is going to allow that investment and growth that we haven't seen
Jonathan,
the last couple
well, you and the other folks in the crypto industry like to use the term regulatory clarity. You might call it regulatory clarity. Perhaps critics out there might say that this could mean the guardrails are off and consumers out there might not have the same protections that they had in previous years. Do consumers need to be protected in this industry?
Absolutely. Kraken was founded over 13 years ago, and we've held customer asset protection, consumer protection is the foundation of our business. And that's what's allowed us to grow and thrive. That's what's made us one of the leading markets for the professional trading community. It's that security, transparency, and trust that really helps markets evolve. And that's been Kraken's story. I think with respect to regulatory clarity, there are a lot of issues out there in the policy arena. And if we look at the SEC Crypto Task Force, there's a number, dozens and dozens of questions. But one thing we do know is that this foundational first step of bringing centralized exchanges like Kraken is one of the most important for that policymakers can take.
One question I have with regulatory clarity, do you think, yes or no, that Kraken can make it to public markets this year, given the volatility?
Well, I can't speak to any specific. I can't speak to any specifics on the timeline, but I can say that IPO and the next stage of capital growth for our company has been one of many goals for us as we look to expand our business, not just here in the United States, but globally. So very exciting times ahead.
We certainly appreciate you joining us. It's Kraken's Jonathan Jachym joining us this afternoon. Well, coming up, Bitcoin at a session low right now. Kavita Gupta of Delta Blockchain joins us next to talk volatility. This is Bloomberg. Bitcoin at a session low right now, down about 1.8%, 88,700. For more, we bring in Delta Blockchain founder Kavita Gupta here on set in New York. The sell-off that we're seeing, the volatility that we're seeing, is it all related to will he or won't he when it comes to tariffs?
100%. And not only about tariffs, right? I mean, there's so many announcements done. Do we not need Congress to approve any of them? Like, I feel like the market is asking from one extreme of the pendulum, we are moving to the other extreme of the pendulum. Now we have strategic reserves, now like not only for Bitcoin, but a lot of other currencies which people were not expecting. We are saying maybe expectedly no capital gains at all, like no taxes if you hold it for more than 1 year. I think it is amazing. These are all the dream bites which every crypto holder for last 10 years wanted. Are we really going to go through all this stuff, and how much changes to that does really entangle?
Well, let's go back to the reserve for a moment here, because there has been so much debate, a lot of skepticism, even from the crypto community, particularly those who believe in Bitcoin the most, of what the purpose of the reserve is, why these other tokens are involved. Explain what this does from the perspective of the American economy, an American citizen. Why would they want this to happen?
100%. Like, coming from a traditional World Bank IFC background, like if you have a petroleum reserve, if you have commodities like gold and silver reserves, yes, in case of a war, in case of, God forbid, something really bad happens, you can use that to have some value to American people. I mean, I do believe in crypto. I'm a holder for 10 years, but I don't understand how does reserve solve that problem in case everything really disappears on this earth.
So you're not in favor of some sort of strategic crypto reserve?
I just don't understand the value. And even
I think critics would say the value is people who have crypto make more money because it's a supply and demand question.
But it's not about the people who have
But it's
crypto.
not about people. Like, we are already making more money.
I think critics might say that it is about
American
people.
taxpayer.
But I mean, that's certainly one view. But I think a cynic might say, well, who's had access to the president? People who have a lot of these assets. They want the value of those assets to go up. And one way to do that is for the U.S. government to buy those assets.
So if that is the definition of creating a reserve, absolutely right, then there should be a pharmaceutical reserves. There should be a lot of, like, all the lobbies can create their own reserves. I'm very happy that there is a crypto reserve, right? But if you really ask me fundamentally, econometric-wise, does it make sense? I don't see it because we are still in a very volatile atmosphere with cryptocurrency. They have not found plus minus 10% like any other commodity. On top of that, Bitcoin and ETH, when you have a lot of other currencies which did not even have their ETF approval.
You're a bull on some of those currencies as well.
Yes, as a trader, yes.
The risk that those currencies do not work out or they do not grow as fast, what kind of risk does that pose for America if there is a reserve that includes them?
Yeah, it's a basket, right? And you suddenly have two AAA standards, Bitcoin and ETH, and then you have baskets of other currencies which are still developing. And then on top of that news, what I see next is World Financial Liberty Reserves have SUI and like a bunch of other stuff. So for me, it's a bit of a confusion. Something which you just said, Tim, whom are we serving here? How are we serving them? And on top of that, what about the Congress? Do they get to say and approve it, or is it going to be a presidential judgment?
Ultimately, does this hurt the space?
I think not in a short term, but you can already see the lack of confidence because everything right is happening with respect to optics, but the market does not have liquidity. People are not putting their money in, and actually I think we are suffering because exactly as I said, the pendulum has moved so far that is it even real? Is it going to be sustainable? Are we going to stick to it? I mean, even we are thinking about it.
Kavita, we thank you so very much for your time. That is Delta Blockchain founder Kavita Gupta. Tim.
Just to clarify what I was saying, find me somebody who doesn't have these assets who's pushing for some sort of strategic reserve.
I agree with you 100%, but unless they're giving everyone a Bitcoin at birth, I don't see how it would equally benefit everybody.
I think that's
absolutely
a fair, 100% agree with you.
But we are so excited to hear the readout from this summit tomorrow and all the news ahead. That's all for Bloomberg Crypto today. Join us again next week because we'll have that readout from you from the White House and even more debate on how this industry should evolve next. This is Bloomberg.